DJ and PK, we're joined now by Quincy Lewis, longtime high school basketball coach here in the state of Utah, former BYU assistant, currently at Lehi, and the state champs after a rousing rally in the state championship game. Quincy, good morning.
Good morning to you guys.
Your name has been all over the place, linked to BYU as a head coach and an assistant. The high school world was buzzing because we were just talking about Brady Kozlowski committing to BYU. You had a huge comeback win to win the state championship. And when you're in high school, the high school basketball scene, you got AAU in the summer. And so it's really, does it ever stop?
No, it doesn't. You might get a little bit at the end of July, 1st of August, but it's you're pretty much going all year.
Tell us how it works with this recruiting that goes on, because, excuse me, you've got the high school season, and then you do have, it's really more than the summer. I think it starts in April, right, as far as that goes. And, you know, we had heard that those relationships with the high school coach are important, but also relationships with these movers and shakers in the out-of-season stuff are as important. And I'm not looking for you to rain on anybody, but thought that Mark Pope didn't have that, and we know the Kozlowski kid wasn't going to go there. Pope leaves, and they bring in Young. How does that work, the relationship in those areas that don't get the publicity? They're not covered in the way that the high school season is. So a lot of us don't know the ins and outs of all that and how it works.
Yeah, no, it's really important. You know, you have the Mountain Stars with Marty Haas, and you have the prospects with Tim Davis. Those are maybe two of the big ones. There's some other ones, you know, like Salt Lake Metro and the Rebels and things like that. But relationships with those guys is really important because they're going to take the guys out in the summer and a little bit in the spring, and college coaches are going to hit those guys, and so it's really important that there's a good relationship there, and really the guys in the state, they do it. All those guys I just mentioned, they all do a good job. They're good guys.
I thought for a long time, and that's probably just because I'm old, how much impact the high school coach had in the recruiting. And then over time, I learned how much impact the AAU people had, and it was massive. But with NIL, how much has that equation changed, and how much is NIL driving everything now? And given that your answer may change in 5 minutes because NIL is pretty new, and it's changing right underneath our feet.
No, hey, NIL's changed it all, right? Relationships you're always going to be really important as you're in recruiting, but it's become lesser because somebody's going to offer you $400,000 and somebody else comes in and says, hey, we're going to give you $600 and we're going to do it over 2 years. That's $400,000. That relationship, with an AAU guy or the high school coach doesn't mean quite as much, when the money's put on the table. But obviously, the AAU guy and the high school guy are important in the whole thing too. But the NIL has become that's become the thing.
Did we hear that you're done coaching high school ball?
Yeah, so I stepped away last week from Lehi. So I'm done coaching high school. We'll see. I could possibly coach somewhere, at a different level at some point, but I'm kind of done with high school for right now.
Do you want to be a college coach, assistant at least?
Yeah, if it was the right situation, I've been in this thing for a little while, and so it has to be just the right deal. I'm not kind of going to go anywhere, but it has to be the right deal with the right guy who maybe has the right kind of vision.
What does the right vision look like?
A winning vision. How are you going to run your practices? What does it look like day in and day out? What kind of kids do you want to get in here? There's a lot to the equation.
Kevin Young does have a little experience coaching in Utah with the Flash. He has a ton of experience outside of Utah. Do you have a relationship with him at all?
No, I don't know him at all. I mean, it's kind of strange, when you're at BYU or you're here in the state. It seems like you run into just about anybody who's a member, has anything to do with basketball at some point, or another. But he's just not one that ever kind of came through BYU or anything like that. So I don't know much about him.
There's been a ton of speculation on what a great fit you would be there. You've already got some experience at the college level, and obviously you got a lot of contacts across the state for a coach who doesn't have any. So that all makes a ton of sense. And when you hear somebody like me talk about that, you just think, man, he's way out over his skis. What does he know?
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about a guy like Kevin Young, and I don't know him at all, but you're talking about a guy like that, he knows a lot of people. He's been in the deal for quite a while, even though it's been more on the pro side, obviously. He knows quite a few people, and so it's, we'll kind of see where he goes with, his people and what he's comfortable with. But because honestly, when you're a head coach, you want guys that they have your back. That's a really it's an important thing. It's as much as you want guys who are recruiters and all these kinds of things, you gotta have guys that have your back, and you want to feel comfortable with those guys. So obviously, the first place he's going to turn is the guys he knows. And then if I'm him, I'm looking at the existing staff. And then you kind of go from there.
Did you happen to see the clip with Dan Hurley, who has won 2 national titles in a row, obviously at Connecticut, and he was talking about the parents? Did you see that?
I didn't see that. What do you have to say on it?
Well, basically that if we get a bad vibe on the parents, we're out the door. And so forget you. And I've heard, we've been involved in athletics here from the media standpoint, DJ and I, combined 80 years practically. And so I know of some horror stories. Could you speak to how is it now? What's the climate with the parent involvement? Has it gotten worse? Is it about the same? What's going on?
It can be tough, and it doesn't surprise me that Dan Hurley said that. He was in high school, for I don't know how many years, maybe 7 or 8 years, and his dad was a legend. I actually coached against his dad in a tournament down in New Mexico once, and I mean, talk about phenomenal coach. I mean, his dad was off the charts. That's as good a coach team as I've ever been against at any level. I mean, he was fantastic. So I can see where that comes, and his dad was a no-nonsense guy. And but I think more of what it is, maybe with parents is it's more of a communication thing. And if you can keep a good communication line, then I don't think you're going to have as many issues. Now, there's always going to be some that are maybe a little bit out there, that doesn't matter, But for the most part, as long as there's some communication, I found that parents are pretty good to deal with.
You've built up a lot of knowledge over a long time. Just listen to that last answer, I think spells that out. And now you're stepping away from the high school game. Maybe you get into the college level. Maybe there's something out there. What do you do with all this knowledge you have? It's really specific to this one area, and yet it looks like you're walking away from it. And you're too young to do nothing, Quincy. What are you thinking?
No. Hey, I'm an athletic director at Lehi. It's a good job for sure. I work with great people, and I've been in college. I've done that deal for. We've got 12 years in college, so I've done both. And I have an idea, obviously, of what each of those things means. And it seems like I'm Marco Polo a little bit. I've been everywhere. It seems like I've done JUCO. I've coached in JUCO. I've coached small college. I've done low Division I, mid-May. I've done it all. So, like I said, I have an idea of what I'm looking for if it's the right thing.
I can remember talking to you. This is probably going back at least 10 years now, and you were telling me there's a family who had several boys played high school basketball, and they had one who was like in the 6th grade, and you told me, you said, he's going to be the best one of the family. And turns out you were right. And so where I'm going with this is that you knew, as a high school coach, pretty much in the state, who was coming up. And for BYU and for Utah and Utah State and Weber and all that in-state kids, particularly for BYU with the Latter-day Saint kids. They need to score a high percentage of those guys, obviously. Could you speak to the high school, not just the high school talent, but the junior high talent as far back as you can go in terms of what you would assess it as the level of talent coming up for the next 3 to 5, 7 years, whatever it might be?
Yeah, I mean, hey, listen, I mean, high school level, I mean, all of your young kids and knowing everybody down to the 3rd, 4th grade, that's your recruiting. That's your lifeblood of your program. It's just like college, your college recruiting is the lifeblood of your program. Because if you haven't got the guys, then it doesn't matter how good a coach you are.
Right.
But, this past year was one of the best years as far as players that the state has seen in 20 years. I mean, you're talking 12 to 14 Division I players really that are coming out. But the reason why you're not seeing all these guys going Division I right now is because we're in a totally different environment right now. And, I mean, you have all these kids, but the transfer portal is just gobbling up so many of those spots right now that they're going to probably have to go somewhere else. So this year was a outstanding year as far as, I mean, kids coming out. Next year is a little more shallow, as far as what's maybe you're talking maybe 3 to 5 Division I guys. Then the following year you've got it's a little bit top heavy, but you've got some very good players coming out the following year after that. So Utah as a state, basketball has really come a long way. It's always been good, but it just seems like it's taken another step.
Quincy Lewis joining us, Lehi athletic director, longtime high school basketball coach. It seemed when PK and I got here in the 90s that there was a pretty steady stream of players and players of different types. Some big guys who played inside, some perimeter, and now the game has changed and everybody's out there shooting threes. But there was a big lull where high school football was taken up, but high school basketball seemed like it was way down. And it does seem like it's bounced back here a little bit. So I'm curious why that might be. Is it just the genetic lottery and it breaks the way it breaks and it is what it is? Or was there something else going on?
Yeah, I think there naturally is some peaks and valleys, for sure, but I think that you just have more kids who are doing a little bit more out of state, and I think you see high schools that take their teams a little, out of state, and when you do that, I think kids see maybe a level that, hey, that's where I want to be. That's how good I've got to be, because if all you're doing is playing against the kids in the state, maybe that doesn't tell you the level you need to be at if you want to get to a mid-major or a high-major level. And so I think there's just more of that now, and I think it's good for the state and players because they can see it better.
Well, you had a kid this year that I thought looked like Jerry West, and that would be your son. I saw him play live in person in December when you played Corner Canyon, and you guys won that one. I know Kozlowski didn't play that game. Had an injury that took him a bit before he got back, but then he did play at the end there, and boy, your boy he was outstanding. What's his future?
Yeah, we'll see. He's had a great year. And again, this is there's a lot to do with the portal here, and we got back from Utah Tech last weekend, and it was great. Those guys, there's a lot of good things happening down there. John's had a great career. This week we go to St. Mary's, and we'll see what that one's all about, and I think probably Penn after that. So he's got some things, some official trips that are lined up, and just kind of see what he's comfortable with. Before Coach Sprinkle left, Utah State was offering it, so we had thought about that one, but then he left, and so it's a tough thing because if you wait it out, till the end of May or 1st of June, you could have some offers that you would never expect, but you want to wait that long, or you feel comfortable with the things that you got right now. This is a really hard time for kids that are coming out of high school because unless you are a 4 or 5 star guy and you're gonna sign early or commit in the summer, then now the time that you're going to be recruited is probably May, or even the middle of June, so it's very, very different now.
I think the transfer portal is a big part of it, but the math says if someone's leaving a transfer portal spot, then that ought to, if you're going in the portal, that opens a spot at the same time that it closes a spot somewhere else. I also think that the bonus year everybody got for COVID, we're getting near the end of it, but I've talked to multiple people who say coaches are content to pass on high school kids right now because they can have a roster full of 23, 24, and 25-year-olds. And those kids are going to beat the best 18, 19, and 20-year-olds more often than not. And so I just wonder what kind of moment this creates for Weber State, UVU, Utah Tech, and Southern Utah if the BYU Utahs and Utah States of the world are out there trying to get 4th, 5th, and 6th-year kids.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're at Weber or you're at Utah Tech or some of these schools, you could be losing some of your best kids. So now what it turns into is you're looking at a roster of a higher level Division I school, and you're saying, okay, this kid averaged 2.2 points a game, but I do believe that kid could, with a better situation, can be really good. We'll take him. Or you're saying to yourself, okay, now I'm in the best situation we've ever been in to be able to get a kid, that is a high-level kid in high school out of Utah. So, for instance, like Cooper, 4 or 5 years ago, he's at BYU, Utah State a couple months ago, and that's a done deal. That's not even the question, okay? But with how it is now, it's exactly what you said. Hey, we can get the best player out of this low major that's a proven player right now. What are we going to do? And we all know, hey, you get into college basketball and it's, hey, it's win now, right? So who's going to win now for me? And so, the Webers of the world, this is a tough deal. Everybody's a JUCO now, other than your really high major schools. Everybody's a JUCO. And so if you're a Weber, you're saying to yourself, okay, do we want to roll the dice on a kid who hasn't proven anything that's at a higher level Division I, or I can get a high school kid I never would have been able to get in years past, and we'll see where that goes.
He might struggle, but if he takes off, someone's going to swoop in with a gazillion NIL dollars, and either way, I'm not going to have him.
Yeah, it's tough. Hey, look at, talking about guys like St. Mary's, Mahaney, that kid comes in as a freshman. He's from Moraga, so they were kind of able to keep the kid under wraps. He never got out on the big-time AAU circuit, so they keep him under wraps, and he goes to St. Mary's, and he has a phenomenal freshman year, really. It must have been really hard to keep him even after his freshman year. And now he's in the portal, and you're looking at high major stuff for that kid. And so that is the quandary that you're in. But, it reminds me so much of when I was at Utah Valley in junior college. Hey, you got 13 to 15 guys that are going to be on your roster, but you know what? We're turning that roster over every year there, where you're getting 10 or 11 new players every year. At Utah Valley when it was a JUCO, and now it's back to you're kind of going back to that.
Well, there don't seem to be any easy answers to that, Quincy. So maybe if you wanted to be an athletic director and sit outside and watch everyone else pull their hair out, that might be a good plan.
Yeah. You know what? I think I think as a coach, everybody you talk to is going to complain about it, right? And this is awful. This is tough. Yeah, it is. It's it's not like it used to be. And at some point, it will come to a head. It will come to a head, and they'll have a little bit more control of it. And it's just, hey, things change, and it just takes time for it all to work out. But while you're in the middle of this, you gotta embrace the thing. That's the only way to move forward. You gotta embrace it and go with it.
If you were to get back in as an assistant, does it make recruiting easier because at the end it comes down so much to playing time in NIL?
Yeah, like I said, the relationships are still important, but that NIL is such a big deal, and Maybe you look at the kid, the Dallin Hall kid, who's quite a player, at BYU, and I don't know what all of his options are, but I can imagine, and I've heard some of the numbers that he might be looking at, and I'll tell you what, I mean, I'd like to make that much in 4 years,
I've told PK that the where NIL has gone now, and because you have an 18-year-old kid, so you're thinking about this, is that you're raising your kids and you're like, how are they going to be able to afford a house? And we can tell kids to be loyal, but they may not be good enough to play professionally, but they can make so much money in college. They can buy a house like 10 years before their peers. Now, that may be not how they choose to spend their money, and that just may be, me, old guy, looking at this. But that's life-changing if you change to do it, if you want to do it. I didn't buy a house until I was in my 30s.
Absolutely. I mean, kids getting offered $400, and somebody comes in at their home school, and somebody comes in and says, "Hey, here's $550 over 2 years. That's $300 difference." I mean, where are you going? And you know what? It really is amazing, because as I've been able to see this firsthand with Cooper, as we've went through a lot of recruiting especially in the last 8 weeks, with all kinds of schools, and we've kind of come down to the ones we're at now, but schools that you would never imagine having NIL and being able to do things have that now. And it actually has just really blown me away, where a kid, they're saying, "Hey, we'll pay this kid $3,000 a month in NIL," from a school that you would look at and say, "What? No way." I mean, it's amazing.
Well, Quincy, we appreciate a few minutes. No hard answers, but we're intrigued with whatever you decide to do next, and maybe that's stay at Lehi and be the power behind the throne there as the AD. Not quite as public as the coaches, but pretty good athletic department going there. So good luck with whatever you choose to do.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
We appreciate it. Quincy Lewis, longtime high school basketball coach, former BYU assistant, former JC assistant, and athletic director at Lehi right now.